a conscious pioneer, a logic general, a reason brigadier, battling a system that finds ignorance profound. Substantial evidence is all we need you to propound. Pascal's wager might seem like a reasoning to you, but my wager, I bet you never meet the burden of proof. Poof, voila, it's magic, can't you see that he said some magic words and then it all just came to be? Ha, more bullshit from the pulpit. Meet me in the comment section and you get schooled, bitch. More bullshit from the pulpit. Meet me in the comment section and you get schooled, bitch. The Godless Engineer.
Alright, hello and welcome. I am the Godless Engineer, and with me today is Matt Dillahunty. If you don't know him, then you probably live under a rock. He's one of the hosts on the Atheist Experience, as well as he travels around and he likes to talk about, several different secular topics, as well as, I guess atheist-centered topics and debate topics. He's got a YouTube channel where he posts informational videos on, debating techniques and whatnot. If you don't know about Matt, don't know his channel, I suggest going there. The link's going to be down below. And let's go ahead and get into talking with Matt. So, hi, Matt. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty good. Had a very busy day at work. I'm kind of in the same field that you were, I guess. I'm a software engineer.
Sure.
And I think if I remember correctly, you were in the software kind of field at one time.
Yeah, actually, I did software quality assurance and was QA lead for like almost 15, 16 years and did hardware testing before that.
Okay. So what motivated you to leave that field and get more into, activism?
Um, so I was actually doing, that was my day job up until January of 2014. And what motivated me was they shut down the Austin office and laid us all off. So I'd been hosting the show. I've done the TV show now for 10 years, and just did it volunteer, in my spare time. It's still a volunteer in my spare time, but after looking around for a job to replace that one in Austin, I decided, with a little help from some friends, that I'd try to make a go at being a professional godless heathen. And so I set up a Patreon and started producing videos, and it gives me a lot more time to, do conventions and conferences, to do more debates, and I'm working on, books and other things as well.
Okay, that's pretty awesome. Do you have any books that you're going to be putting out this year?
I don't know if the first one's actually going to be done before the end of the year. I'm actually booked for conferences and stuff, like about two of them a month all the way through November. So some of it can be written on planes, and some of it will be written in between. I'm not sure, having not written one before. I think the first one's actually going to be fairly straightforward and kind of easy, but I couldn't even really guess right now.
Well, I don't know how you write anything on a plane. I was recently on two of them getting to Milwaukee, and there was just no room for me at all.
Yeah, it's one of the things where if I know I'm going to actually sit down and do some writing, which happens a lot because I don't tend to give the same talk over and over, maybe once or twice. There's one talk I've given probably 4 or 5 times. It's always a little different, and so I pick a topic or let the conference organizers pick a topic, and I'll usually outline my talk on the flight to the event. So if I know I'm actually going to be writing, then I'll probably go ahead and pay the 20 or 30 bucks extra to get the extra leg room, just so that the seat back tray table will fold down enough for me to fit a laptop on it.
Yeah, I know. I always get stuck in coach. That's about how much I can spend on a seat. But I think that if I was in your position, and I had that in mind, I would definitely shell out that money.
Well, I don't end up flying first class or anything, but the handful of slightly extra legroom seats work out pretty well. And I've done a ton of flying lately with the trip to Australia and England, and yeah, it's been a busy few months.
And I don't want to go too much into this, but did you just take like 2 plane rides to write your responses to Side 10?
Uh, no, actually, I had I wrote all that here, the pre-written responses, probably about. I think the final version was done about 4 or 5 days before the debate.
Okay. Now, I've been getting bugged about this a little bit, so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask. Do you have any plans to respond to G-Man?
No,
Okay.
I posted a 35-minute video with a detailed look at the argument about the Bible and slavery, and I sat there and I read the Bible and I posted it up on the screen and I went through and explained everything. And in response, what I found was really strange was he would read down through verse 21 and then he'd stop and he asked a question which was expressly answered in verse 22. Now, I don't know if he intentionally stopped or if some protective mechanism in his brain stopped, but I figured we were done with it at that point, that there was no reason for me to pay any attention. But somebody sent me a link yesterday, and evidently he's back to posting ridiculous, I'm calling Matt Dillahunty out, and, just, I don't, it's, so this is my job, and I'm interested in, actually having conversations with people. But you just look, if you're going to run around and say that I'm a coward who won't debate, you just look stupid because I think maybe the best response is to cobble together pictures of me standing behind a podium having a debate with someone, and then how many pictures of G-Man standing behind a podium having a debate with someone. I don't think any such picture actually exists. There's something about YouTube culture that for some seems to just be poisoning their brains to where YouTube somehow is more important than real life, and that you're a legit, sincere, thoughtful, academic, serious about this stuff just because you posted a video, whether anybody watched it or not.
Yeah. When I got asked about, you responding to him and whatnot, I was like, Matt's not going to respond to him. And they're like, why do you think that? It's like, because he doesn't respond to that level of stupid.
Well, I did post a video, and because I try to be fair, but there's a level of childishness there that, and I think I mentioned before that he tends to view debate as if this is some kind of WWE match, and now he's putting on boxing headgear, and so yeah, I have better things to do with my time than to engage with whatever YouTube buffoon has managed to become obsessed with me.
Yeah, I have to say, when he first came on there with the whole boxing thing on, I was like, what's happening? Do you have to wear that in order to walk around? But anyways, let's get off the whole G-Man thing because that's ridiculous. So let's talk about the American Atheist Conference. Now, you were there. Yeah.
I'm working.
Yeah. And I was there too, and I saw your magic show, and I thought that it was pretty cool and really fun. Yeah, but I'm kind of curious. Were you really excited to hear any of the other speakers that were there?
Oh yeah, see, I'm one of the people who I only get to go to conventions if I'm speaking because I have a limited amount of time and the resources and everything. Now that this is my job, I'm not making nearly as much as I was in software, so I pretty much only get to hear talks if they end up online or if I'm actually there at the conference. And so when I go, I tend to try to listen to as many as possible. I mean, there's a handful that I'm gonna miss. There's some of them that I would have heard several times before because you end up with some speakers at several conferences giving similar or the same talk. But yeah, I was really looking forward. I was looking forward to meeting Ian Hersey Lee and engaging with some of the other speakers for the whole convention.
Well, one particular talk that I found really interesting was Sarah Moorhead's hotline project talk. I'm kind of wondering how you feel about the hotline project in general.
Oh, I'm fully supportive. As a matter of fact, I spoke with Sarah about this when it was in the early stages. I was, I believe, one of the first test calls, and I am a hotline volunteer, except I've been so crazy busy. They rolled this out right before, I was heading to Australia and everything. So I haven't gone to do my training, so I can't actually take calls yet. But I just got an email the other day with a new schedule of potential training. So I'm going to go train up and I'll be on the hotline.
Awesome. Yeah, and I was able to talk to Sarah Moorhead at the conference, and at the conference she had to read off the stuff because she didn't have the resources to anonymize the voices and whatnot in order to
Right.
play them. Well, I pretty much went back to the hotel room right after that and spent about 15 minutes and figured out an easy way to do it for her. And so when she's available and she doesn't have a lot on her plate, I'm going to work with her to be able to put something together so that she can anonymize the calls and be able to play those whenever she goes to promote the hotline project.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. Imagine you could just run a filter on Audacity or something to.
Well, yeah, actually, it's just a simple pitch shift. Basically, you shift it to the lower end, and it gives it that nice, deep, anonymizing kind of sound. And
I think my mixer does that automatically, but I don't have it set up for it right now.
yeah, but I know one thing that she was really concerned about was being able to do it themselves because, of course, I'm not really going to be able to do anything with the calls. But, I figured if I could set up a really easy to use guide for Audacity or something like that, something that's not going to cost them really any money, then I think that it could be really beneficial for them.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
It's good to get, I didn't mind the fact that she had to read them a little bit because I love listening to Sarah talk and I like hearing her passion about the project. So, I mean, that's great too. But getting to hear the emotion of the voice, as the words are spoken rather than having them read could be something kind of impactful for improving this. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah. Well, I have the same opinion as you. I think that it could really, really drive it home to hear, some of these voices because, like, one that I really want to focus on is that last transcript that, she read. The 12-year-old girl who's really concerned about her parents basically booting her out of the house and shunning her for her whole life just because she didn't believe in the same God as they did. And what I want to pose to you is how do you feel about that part of the Christian community, the part of the Christian community that is really kind of turning on itself and cannibalizing itself?
Um, I'm not sure that I see that. I mean, I don't know. Can you kind of rephrase that so I get a better grip on it?
Okay. Well, like with the call, basically the call that she read was highlighting how some Christians in the movement are basically, pushing out other Christians that don't exactly believe like them, and it's moving them to, more closer to, towards the nuns category, out of religion, and it just seems to be kind of cannibalizing itself.
I don't know that I think that that's accurate, and that's why I kind of wanted to go through it one more time because Christianity isn't just one thing, or one group or one church. Um, this is the type of thing that's been going on forever. It's how new churches were formed. It's how new denominations were created. Oh, you don't agree with me on this, so and I don't agree with you, then fine. Okay, Martin Luther's going to, nail his protest up, and we're going to have Protestantism branch off from Catholicism and Orthodoxy, and then you're going to have Baptists and Methodists and Lutherans and Episcopalians. I think one of the nice things is that um, the problem, I would say, is that they don't have to leave Christianity to find a place that's willing to accept them. It's so diverse now that they may have to do some legwork, and it may be difficult. But there's probably, considering that we have gay Christian churches, I think there's probably a Christian church for almost anybody. And when you consider people like the Reverend Barry Lynn, who identifies as a Christian, he's a minister, he's the president or chairman of Americans United for Separation of Church and State. He and I tend to agree on almost everything except whether or not a God exists, and he's a great advocate for church-state separation. What I like about this is not so much that they're necessarily cannibalizing themselves, but that they're driving people away, in particular, from fundamentalism, from the fundamental literalist view that is kind of more hateful and farther removed from what I think is a rational worldview.
Okay, yeah, I can actually see that, especially down here in the South, because we don't have a lot of these kind of churches, but there are a lot more churches popping up to where they're a lot more, I guess, liberal with the Bible and what they believe, and it's getting to the point where it's just a general God kind of concept. I don't know if you get what I mean with that.
Yeah, and actually, I gave an entire talk in California a couple of years ago, basically saying that I think fundamentalists and literalists should be our target audience, or they are prime audience for what I do in particular. And I think it was phrased a little differently in that we need to be going after rednecks. As a redneck of some credibility, I like this idea. Now, I think that what we're seeing when it comes to Christianity kind of eating itself a little bit is, as we begin to learn more about the universe and as the internet expands everyone's access to this information, instead of seeing like this broad spectrum of Christianity, I think you're going to see a gaping chasm, and you're going to have a rise in fundamentalists and literalists and young earth creationists, everything that's over on this side, and perhaps a significant rise in the extremely liberal, the almost, I believe, you don't, we don't really care, and God loves everybody. And so it's not Christianity as I understood it. It's not anything that is biblical. It doesn't have a leg to stand on. That's part of the problem, is that these liberal theologians, these liberal Christians, they are basically taking, like, here's all of the things that Christianity believes, and they're saying no, 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 and getting it down to just the things that they don't object to. And so they don't have a biblical leg to stand on. They don't have a history to stand on. They can, at best, appeal to personal revelation, which is useless. Anybody could, appeal to that for anything. And I think we're going to get to a point where there's not that many in the middle anymore. The kind of moderate Christians who are frequent churchgoers and believe a lot of the, like heaven and hell and angels, and have this doctrine of salvation, but maybe aren't as extreme as, I don't want to say Westboro because that's way out on the end, but the more literal Christians like my family was.
Okay. I'm kind of curious. Do you feel that the fundamentalists are, I guess, judging by how you phrased your last answer, you might agree, but do you think the fundamentalists are kind of like on a rise right now?
I think so. I don't think it's a huge rise, and I don't think that and I'm just guessing. I'm just kind of spitballing here. I saw some studies that showed that there's still a bunch of people who reject evolution. There are still a bunch of young Earth creationists, and even in England, where I was there last week, there's an increase in the number of young Earth creationists right now. It's not massive, but I don't think they're drawing from the pool of non-believers. The nuns continue to grow, so far as I can tell. I think that this is just an example of the chasm that I'm talking about, where you have these moderates who are kind of maybe wishy-washy and, I'm liberal on this and conservative on this. And what happens is, when you challenge those people, when those people who are essentially giving lip service to the idea of Christianity to come up with a sound biblical basis for their views, and they can't, they have two options. They either accept the Bible and move back into fundamentalist, literalist worldview, or they move out towards liberal theology, which is, I think, I would say that it's like on the verge of atheism, except that I don't think they ever get there. They're just clinging to this. And when you, for somebody like me who was a literalist fundamentalist, and many of the people I've met coming from this, when they're challenged and the foundation is knocked out from underneath them and they can't believe anymore, they don't tend very often to kind of drift off to liberal Christian land. They tend to become secularists. They tend to say, okay, that now I understand that I didn't have good reason for that, and hopefully we can instill in them this idea that they want to believe things based on good reasons, which case they're not going to end up the liberal Christians. But
Right. Do do you think that the nuns category, you mentioning that, do you think that them growing is a sign of moving to a more secular, society, I guess, and kind of religion taking a back seat to its privilege, I guess, in society?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the overall trend, I think reason and reality tend to win out in the end every time. It's just how quickly do you get there. And so we see kind of a decline in church attendance, we see a decline in, fundamentalists for a while, and then there's a spike, but the spike's never quite as high as it used to be. So the trend is still a decline. And part of the problem here in the United States is that when you look back at the 19th century and you had Colonel Ingersoll and others, once we had we finished. We got through the Enlightenment. We were working towards, Darwin comes out with evolution by natural selection, the origin of the species, and we started this rapid increase in scientific information, scientific discovery, inventions, and stuff like that. What happened was the intellectual elite in the United States kind of said, okay, we've got this religion problem beat. It's going to go away eventually. We know that. So let's let the little people who aren't as smart as us keep their religion. They'll go away. They'll die off. And religion will just fade away. There's nothing there that's going to make it kind of rise again and take hold. It will fade in the same way that the Greek pantheons. Jesus will become as irrelevant as the Greek pantheon. And then we had this kind of you don't discuss religion and politics at dinner and stuff. It's impolite. And that kind of quieted the conversation. And then in the 1950s, you had a reactionary charge in response to the perceived godless communists in the Soviet Union. And all of a sudden, we started putting in God we trust everywhere on our money and changed the pledge. And then you had the rise of the religious right and quote unquote values voters. And pretty much every time you see the word family, it's tied to, some right wing fundamentalist Christian group or another. And that's because we got lazy. It's because we got arrogant and apathetic about, hey, this is going to go away, so let's not worry about it. And I think the lesson to be learned is you have to worry about it. You have to be diligent. I mean, the Supreme Court, when they were ruling about the Ten Commandments monuments, Justice Breyer invented a grandfather clause out of whole cloth. He just basically said, oh, the one in Texas can stay because it's been there for 50 years and nobody complained, which was a big, bullhorn to let people know, oh, if you don't want to have bad legal precedents like this in the future, then you need to complain.
Yeah. Something that you had just said sparked something in my head. If it comes back to me, I'll come back to it. Now, at the American Atheist Conference, David Silverman really put out this idea that we should really start using the word atheist and calling ourselves atheists. I'm kind of curious, how do you feel about that? Do you think that we need to start doing that a lot more, or do you think it doesn't really matter?
Well, I think it matters. And I want as many people out there identifying as atheists as we can get. But I have a couple of kind of caveats to Dave's position. I tend to agree with it. On the other hand, I recognize that and I think Dave does too, that it's not necessarily safe for everybody to come out and use the atheist label yet. We've had people who've lost their family, their livelihood, who've been, run out of town, essentially. And we've got to do some more work to change the world around people so that more and more people can come out. I think we're kind of pushing it to the tipping point. So the urging is to have those people who can and are willing to say, yes, I'm an atheist, and to do so, because that makes it very, very hard for people to vilify an entire group of people if they know people in that group. If, my next door neighbor, who's getting ready to move, he is some kind of campaign strategist who worked on the Perry campaign. Now, I don't know what his religious views are, but we're light years apart on politics, and yet we get along. And I was very open about the fact that I'm an atheist. I tend to wear my various atheist T-shirts when I'm working around in the yard and we're talking. And he knows that his next door neighbor, who's happy to loan him a lawnmower or help him with something, is an atheist. Now, how likely is he to ever again, if he'd ever said it before, I don't know, run around perpetrating this idea that atheists are, immoral, that they're not decent people, that they, don't care about, community and society, when he's seen the opposite of that, and that's what we need.
Yeah, I really agree. I'm kind of curious. I don't know if you get this a lot, but I know I do. Is this question from even atheists as to why it's important for us to really be active and be persistent about fighting against the religious intrusion into politics or society or general life in general. I'm kind of curious. What are your thoughts on that kind of attitude?
On which kind of attitude?
Well, just the attitude of that we don't need to focus on it too much, or why do you have to focus on
Oh,
being
it's well. This goes back to what I was saying a minute ago about Ingersoll and what we lost at the end of the 19th century. It's the reason why I think we do, and so there's this idea that some have tossed about, about we only need to focus on the biggest problems or real serious, dramatic, catastrophic harms. And I think that's absurd. Focus on what you can fix. The kind of think globally, act locally mentality. You can look at it and you can say, okay, well, religion, superstition, irrational thinking is a terrible problem. So we should teach everyone critical thinking and skepticism. And I completely agree. But when people want to say that, oh, you shouldn't complain about the privileged position that religions tend to have in society, or you should, maybe not be so open and loud, perhaps. No. If these ideas are good, then demonstrate that they're good and we'll hang on to them. If they're true, demonstrate that they're true and I will accept them. But if they are neither demonstrably true nor demonstrably good, then I'm definitely not going to sit by quietly while they get a privileged position, while the de facto standard, if you're going to elect somebody to office, is to expect them to pander to God belief in some way, whether they're a believer or not. Now, I think almost, most of them are, but we know there are people who have served in Congress who were non-believers during the time that they served and never, ever announced it until they got out. Barney Frank comes to mind as well, an openly gay senator who was an atheist but didn't talk about his atheism until he was done serving in the Senate. Now, I haven't, gone through and looked at all the legislation that he supported or otherwise. I tend to think that he and I probably would agree on a great many things. But if he was, in addition to not being vocal about his atheism, also working alongside people to implement more religious privilege, a more preferential position for believers, then that was a big mistake. That was something that should have been opposed. And I don't understand this idea, this kind of let's wait around and hope that it changes. You have to, the cliched be the change you want to see in the world. Maybe not every problem is huge, but that doesn't mean it's not worth attention. And when we're like, Ayan Hirsi Ali at the American Atheist Convention had made a comment implying essentially that we're kind of post-Christian, that we shouldn't have to worry about Christianity when there are bigger issues with, Islam and the fundamentalists pushing Sharia law and killing people for being homosexual, etc. I understand where she's coming from. And if I had her background, I think that I might perhaps tend toward that kind of message. Perhaps not. But the fact of the matter is, if somebody were actually suggesting, hey, let's not worry about Christianity or what's happening with regard to Christianity and politics in the United States and instead focus on this issue, I think I would first say no. I'm not going to sit by while the religious right takes over my government, because then you come back to an even bigger issue. There's this idea of proper triage, of how do you determine which issue to address. And if your method of triage is to always go after the biggest issue, you're making a huge mistake. And when we're talking about people and potentially convincing people as well, it's an even bigger mistake. Because if we sort out perhaps the smaller issues, the ones we can fix, plug the smaller holes, that girds up the wall a little so that we can address the bigger holes. And when we're talking about issues with people, changing the way people think about religious privilege in areas where we can, like I can, to some extent here in the U.S., I can't do anything, in pretty much any other country. I may not even be able to do much outside of Texas, but that might get you allies to go and fix the bigger problem. If there are people who are brought in to an emergency room, you bring in a whole bunch of patients after a catastrophe, and the doctors are going to look at some of them and say, yeah, that guy's dead. Not dead yet, but he's essentially dead. If every second I spend trying to fix this gaping, open chest wound is a second that could have been spent on something that was fixable. And so you have to think about proper triage.
I think that's a perfect analogy. Before we move on from the American Atheist Conference, though, I want to know, did you happen to watch the God's Not Dead riff?
Riff?
Well, yeah, where the guys from Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Oh yeah. I was in the second row, sitting right behind them.
Okay, what did you think about it?
Oh, I loved it. It's the only way that you could have got me to watch that movie. And my wife had to give me, there were several times where I was just, head down, and almost in physical pain, and she's gently rubbing my back, like, don't worry, these guys will make it funny and tolerable. And then it turns out that I found out later that evidently Kevin Sorbo may have based his character for that movie on me. And so he did this Ask Me Anything on Reddit, which was pretty much silly, but he mentioned that he had watched the president of some organization who was on TV and blah, blah, blah. And I don't remember all the details. And then he went on to do this, why do they bother talking about this? I don't believe in vegetables, but I don't spend all my time talking about it. So I went on Twitter and challenged him to a debate about whether or not God exists and whether or not vegetables exist, because I do believe in vegetables.
How did that go?
No response at all.
Yeah. That's what David Silverman's kind of experienced, as I've noticed, because I've tried to follow every time that David Silverman calls him out, but it's always just silence. But that's kind of interesting that he chose, you were one of the people that he chose to base his character off of, which I think that's a total mischaracterization of any atheist I can think of.
There was confusion as to whether or not he based it on me or Dave or some combination of the two of us or somebody else who we're not aware of. Sorbo hasn't confirmed any of this, but when people read the Reddit comment, they immediately started poking me, saying, "Oh my gosh, he based it off you." Now that may be people reading into it. What I can say is that watching his acting and the character, I don't see myself or Dave. So maybe he's an even worse actor than I thought, or we've got it wrong about who he based it off of.
Yeah, I can't for the life of me think of who he could have been basing it off of, unless he's pulling every negative perception out of any atheist he might have seen, like not just you, but a whole lot of other people. But yeah. That's what it seemed like to me. But let's kind of move on and talk about this trip around Australia.
Sure.
You went down there for, I guess it was kind of a lecture series. Is that right?
Yeah. So Aaron Ra from YouTube fame and the Foundational Falsehoods of Creationism, and Seth Anders, who runs the Thinking Atheist podcast, the three of us a couple of years ago kind of formed together and went out on the Unholy Trinity tour here in the United States. And it was a bit of kind of tongue-in-cheek joke, the Unholy Trinity, blah, blah, blah. We did 3 cities in the South, and had a great time. But the first thing that happened was people started saying, "Hey, when will you come to our town? When will you come to our town?" And it's a lot of work. Not so much for me. I just show up and talk, but it was a lot of work for Seth and for the people who put together the events. I'm incredibly fortunate in that I only have to pretty much show up and talk. But one of the things that happened was some folks in Australia said, "What would it take to get you to come to Australia to do this?" And so, we told them, and I thought that was going to be the end of it. I didn't think anything was ever going to actually happen. But to their credit, there were some folks down there, Adam Reeks, Andrew Skagg, others, who worked their ass off and made it happen. And so we went down. Actually, Arn and I went down a few days early and went to New Zealand, just the two of us, and did an event in Auckland. And that was amazing in and of itself because New Zealand is gorgeous. And so we got to go to Hobbiton where they filmed the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit. It's a little kind of theme park thing now. But we left, and then the three of us did the Unholy Trinity tour in Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne. And then Seth and his family headed home, and Aaron and I continued on to Perth to do an Unholy duo event, I guess, kind of like the Auckland one. But it was great.
Awesome. Did you meet any interesting people while you were there? Like anybody that sticks out in your head?
Street preachers, and so there were plenty of great people who came to the events, part of the Atheist Foundation of Australia and other secular groups and skeptic groups in the area. There was far too many people who were great, and I want to thank the people who hosted us and put us up again. But I think each of the events, there was basically each of us would get up and give a talk for 35, 40 minutes. And then once all three of us had done that, then we'd sit around and take questions from the audience until time ran out for the venue. And it was good to be able to do that and even go out to dinner with some folks afterwards and have conversations. I hate to say this, but actually engaging with the street preachers was one of my favorite things. And it's partially because I've said before, I'd rather speak to a crowd full of religious people than atheists, because I think the religious people might benefit more from what I have to say quite often than atheists, not always. But I loved going out there and do it because I ran into, I think I spoke to 1, 2, 3, 4 different street preachers in Sydney and Melbourne, and they were all very different, even though they ostensibly believed the same things. And I know Adam has put up a video that includes the audio of one of my talks with a street preacher, and I'm going to be editing that video and putting it out as well. The videos from the talks that we gave in the Q&A session for all of Australia have already been posted. I did 2 different talks over the course of 3 cities. So I posted both of those talks and then the Sydney Q&A on my YouTube channel, which is done through my Patreon project.
Okay. At the American Atheist Conference, actually, there was a number of street preachers that were out there, as well as that prayer rally that was happening across the street. I'm just kind of curious. Is there any like if you could give any one certain, I guess, a piece of advice for anybody that wants to talk to a street preacher, what would that be?
Ask lots of questions. The Socratic method of asking questions, and they don't have to be explicitly leading questions. They don't have to be gotchas, but just asking questions, because they're the ones who believe something that they'd like you to believe. And they're the ones who have a position that they have to defend if they're going to, if they want to convince anybody. So that means that they should be ready to answer questions. But they've got an instruction right there in their Bible. 1 Peter 3:15 tells them to be ready at all times to provide the reason for the faith that they have. And one of the best ways to convince somebody that they're mistaken, or that they, are being irrational or don't have a good reason for belief, is to ask questions so that they discover this on their own. It may be far more effective for them to discover that perhaps they don't have a good reason than it is for you just to tell them that. So ask questions, be honest, be yourself. If you don't know something, say you don't know. Because quite honestly, many times the things that they're challenging, we don't have the answers to, but they're the ones who are pretending to have the answers. You know, in a debate that I did in San Antonio, it was, you know, please explain consciousness to us. Well, I don't have an explanation for consciousness. Do you have one? Yes, God created. Okay, what is your reason for believing that? What evidence do you have for that? You know, and the same thing for the origins of the universe. I can't explain the origins of the universe to you. We're working on the issue, and when I say we, I mean humanity, not me specifically. But there are scientists who are coming up with models to try to best describe that a solution to that problem, or a potential solution to that problem. But let's say that I have absolutely no idea why there's a universe instead of not. If a street preacher would look at that and say, you don't know. Correct. And so far as I can tell, you don't know either. And if you do know, I'd like you to explain it to me. What is your reason? Why do you find this compelling? Because as you keep going through this, you'll begin to spot fallacies. You'll be able to poke holes in there, and you'll be able to do a lot of it just by asking questions. Like, well, what would change your mind? What would convince you you're wrong? Or, well, wouldn't this other model also be consistent with that? How is what you've come up with testable and falsifiable? How is it distinct from universe creating pixies or prayer answering pixies? Or, you know, what's the difference between God and magic? And if it comes down to faith, is there anything that you can't justify with faith? Because if faith can justify anything, then it shouldn't be used as a justification for anything.
Yeah. I agree. And just to kind of relate with what you're saying here, as far as continuously asking questions, is I actually got a set of Mormons to come back to my house 3 separate times.
Wow.
And yeah, and on the second or third time, I actually got one of them to admit that he sounded crazy when he was trying to describe why, you know, he felt the Holy Spirit and that it was the Mormon Holy Spirit or a Mormon God or whatnot, and not some other kind of, like he was just saying, I just knew, and he was like, that sounds crazy, kind of deal. So you know,
in debates, when you know, like I'll do a debate at a university or a conference or something, and the person who shows up is a Christian, believes in Jesus and believes that, you know, the miracles of Jesus, all this other stuff, and if we're debating the existence of God, you wouldn't know they were a Christian. You could take the entire content of their debate and transplant it and have it coming out of the mouth of a Muslim or anybody else, because they use generic arguments. And quite often, instead of using the argument that convinced them, they're using the argument that they think should convince you. And when you get to why they're actually convinced, it's, I got personal revelation from Jesus, or experience, you know, whatever else, the divine sense, or... So what the truth is that they have a belief, and then they have constructed arguments that seem consistent with that belief, not that necessarily lead to that belief for anybody. And I've said before, when it comes to arguments, you know, like the presuppositionalists like Tsai, or the those using, like Matt Slick, the transcendental argument for the existence of God, I'm not convinced there's a single human in the history of the planet who has come to believe even in a God, let alone Jesus, because of the transcendental argument for the existence of God, or because of presuppositional apologetics. And so that makes them incredibly dishonest, at least in the sense that the arguments that they're presenting didn't convince them, aren't likely to convince anybody else. It's a way of trying to nail a new stake onto something that they already believe, just to give it just a little extra support. Unfortunately, the nails that they're using are air.
I I find myself very confused by the presuppositional argument, and it's not that I don't understand like the argument itself. It's just like I don't understand how somebody could actually like start from that position. Because and I mean, tell me if I'm wrong about this, Matt. But the presuppositional argument, basically, you start with God exists, and then you basically everything falls into place, as Matt Slick would say. Like you make reality fit into God existing, basically. And
Essentially, they're saying you have to start there. That if you don't start there, if you start anywhere else other than with God exists, you can't get anywhere. Is kind of one of the versions of that argument.
yeah, and I don't know. It always confuses me because you get to that point and it's like they're catch-all for any kind of argument, and that's why G-Men wins every single time, is because it gets to the point where it's pointless to even have a conversation with them. But kind of moving on from that, I know that you had said earlier that you're pretty much scattered throughout the year going to multiple different conferences. I'm kind of curious, where can we find out, where these, do you have a site that we can go to find where you're at?
Yeah, so not yet. The plan when I started doing the Patreon project was to I bought the atheistdebates.com domain, and I own it, and I'm in the process of working out a deal to get a website put up at that domain, and that site will have all the content from the YouTube, Patreon stuff, as well as information on hey, how do I get a hold of Matt? How can I get Matt to do a debate or come speak here? And perhaps other people as well. I think Atheist Debates may grow beyond it just me, but also there'll be a calendar of events. It's just I haven't gotten around to doing it with all the traveling to Australia and everywhere else. And I don't want to sound like I'm complaining. It's been great. I've had a great time, and it was just unbelievable to be able to do those things. I'm home for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and I'm going to the Kentucky Free Thought Convention at the end of May. The very next week, I go to Imagine No Religion 5 in Vancouver. And then I'm home for about a month, but I've got a potential debate in Dallas in July, the Gateway to Reason convention at the end of July in St. Louis, and then that's not even I saw the next thing on my list was the first weekend in September is TAOM, which isn't actually an atheist convention at all. It's the Texas Association of Magicians. So I blocked that in there so that I wouldn't accept a debate or anything over that weekend, so I could go hang out with my magic buddies.
Oh, awesome. I know I'm trying to actually get a bit more into conferences and going. Like I know I kind of mentioned to you that I went up to Milwaukee for one of their first conferences, and what I want to do at these conferences is kind of do like a live podcast kind of stream thing and let people get on, tell their stories and everything like that. So that's
something we've been talking about. Actually, Margaret Downey, who I adore, kind of stuck this idea in my head, and I've been trying to promote it wherever I can. And that is, conferences are great. I love doing it. I hope that people are getting something out of it and not just going for the weekend and then getting their atheist fix or their secular fix or skeptic fix and then going home and doing nothing. But while it's great to have people get up and do talks, we need a bit more than that. It was one of the reasons why I was happy to kind of do a magic show as opposed to a regular talk this time. But also, and I think I'm doing that in Oklahoma as well, but also what we need are people telling their stories. There have been a few, and at American Atheist, Tracy got up and gave her story of escaping a cult, which is amazing and just blows my mind that in this day and age, one of the comments that she made to me when we were talking is, have you seen M. Night Shyamalan's The Village?
Yeah.
Yeah, most people looked at that and were like, "Oh, this is utterly ridiculous." And she looked at it and said, "No, it's not ridiculous. This isn't too far removed from the life that I had growing up." It's just amazing. But hearing people's stories about transitioning out of religion or problems that they've had with their families, because whether they were ever religious or not, draws us together as a community and connects people. And so I love the idea that there are more and more stories coming out, in addition to just, here are the arguments for the existence of God and how you refute them, and here's something stupid in the Bible and something stupid in the Quran. And, I want to educate people, but I'm also a humanist, and I do all of this because I'm a humanist, because I care about what kind of world I live in. And so the types of things that bring us together and explore, our humanity are things that I find interesting and I would like to encourage.
Awesome. That gives me a lot of, I guess, drive to be a bit more diligent about going to these things. Because, I mean, I had a lot of fun at the Milwaukee convention, talking to a lot of people. There was one girl that sat down and talked, and, like, while she was talking, her lip was quivering as she was talking about, the life that she had grown up in and everything. And then another guy, Daniel Weeby, he's an ex-JW actually, and he's actually been like cast out and shunned by his church and family. Like he's got nobody other than his significant other, and so I mean those stories are just powerful, and that's why I want to go to these conferences and do that a little bit more. I'm trying to go to the St. Louis one, and then possibly Aposticon in the fall are the two that I'm going to try to focus on. So,
Yep, I'm looking forward to both those. By the way, I left one of them out, and that is the weekend of June 20th at the Oklahoma Free Thought Convention, and I'll probably be doing some magic at that one as well. So,
that's awesome. How long have you been doing magic?
about 41 years.
Oh wow! Well, what got you into that?
Um, Yeah, well, I grew up around a family of card players, and Doug Henning was on TV, and some uncle would show me a trick, even if it was something simple, and it just captured my brain. And so, yeah, I for years, when I was a teenager and I was heavily into it, I wanted to do it for a living, but I didn't want to do kid shows. And despite the fact that I could work churches and old folks' homes, I wanted to. I love doing the close-up stuff, and that doesn't sell as well. And I didn't want to do kid shows, so I just kind of kept it up as a hobby and collector. Heck, I've got like a little miniature dissecto on my table that I got at the auction as well. But as I got more and more involved in the atheist and skeptic community, and there's a lot of magicians in the skeptic community. It just seemed like, once upon I know this trick that would actually teach a lesson about critical thinking and skepticism, about how we're fooled. Oh, hey, here's another trick that might do this. And so trying to put together, in an hour-long show that teaches people about critical thinking and skepticism and entertains at the same time. Well, I don't think I've completely solved that, because I don't think the show was perfect, but I think it's getting a little better every time I do it and I make changes. But I just love doing it. I love magic. I love talking, in case you couldn't tell, and I love interacting with people. So it works out well.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of curious. I know that you're really booked up throughout the year with conferences, but is there anything else that you're doing? Keeping up your regular schedule with the Atheist Experience and everything.
That's that's the part that's actually kind of suffered, is that with all the travel, obviously if the show's on Sunday and I'm in another city on Sunday, then I can't be on the show that day. And so I've been on the show less and less, which is not, I don't think it's a terrible thing, because I work with great people and everybody on the show does a good job. So, if I'm not there, there's plenty of other people there to have the conversation as well. But I love doing it. I mean, I would do the show four or five times a week if I could. So when I'm in town, I plan to do the show, and when I'm not in town, obviously there'll be other people working on it. There was about a 3-week gap where we didn't have a show recently because one of our producers got a job and had to move to a new town, and the other producer was on her honeymoon. So we had a little gap, but we are back and up and rolling.
Awesome. Well, I can't wait to watch those on YouTube, because I always miss the time on Sunday to watch it on Ustream. And finally, to kind of round off the interview today, I'm just kind of curious. If there's any one certain thing that you could tell, like a closeted atheist that's out there watching this right now, what would that be?
You're not alone. You, what I heard over and over again over the last 10 years of doing the show, I'd get an email from somebody saying, "Hey, I'm still in the closet and I'm the only atheist I know." Well, one of the reasons that you're the only atheist you know is because you're in the closet. It's very difficult to find others if you're not able or willing to be out. But in a lot of cases, these people weren't closeted, yet they still felt alone. Oh, there's no atheist groups in my area. And a few times, like seriously, a 10-second Google search found atheist groups in their area. It's so I don't really understand that. But in some cases, there wasn't a group that was close enough. In some cases, there were 3 or 4 groups that were fairly close. And I know that it's difficult for people to say, "Oh, there's not a group, so I'm going to start one," because maybe you don't think you have any expertise in that area. It doesn't matter. Get involved in the online conversations. Go to conventions that are near you. One of the things I've lobbied for at national conventions, which still hasn't happened, and I believe somebody else gave me this idea and I just tweaked it a bit. I would like to see, like if we did a national convention for American atheists, maybe next year. Oh, no, next year there won't be one. But you have a map of the entire United States. Or if you're doing a state convention, you have a map of your entire state, just right there on the floor, huge, like filling up the room. And you pause and have everybody go stand where they live on that state or on the United States. And that lets you know, hey, these are the people who are close to me. These are the people who are way far away. And I've already made friends with that person over there on the other side of the room. So now I have a way to connect with the individuals on the other side of the state. But I haven't connected with this person who's right here next to me. And this is how you build up the local communities. You make friends, and these people want to keep working together. Because I heard a story which, on the one hand, I love, and on the other hand, it kind of breaks my heart a bit. These two people show up at a convention, and they're like, "Hey, what are you doing here?" They're both atheists. They've both been atheists for ages. They made it a convention, and it turns out they are neighbors who share a back fence and had known each other for a long time and had never had the conversation. So for the closeted atheists out there, the people who feel alone, you're not alone. Find a way to engage with people in local groups or even online if you have to, so that you have some kind of support network that is not contingent upon religious belief built in. Because if you do decide to come out at some point, if you're willing to accept the potential consequences, you risk losing those social connections that are based on religion, where people don't want anything to do with you if you don't share their religious beliefs. So you need to start building those other ones now. And you're going to have to be the one that's going to have to take the step, because it's unlikely that anybody's going to come to you, especially if you're closeted. But you're not the only one, not by a long shot. 10 years, I've heard from thousands of people all over the world who keeps trying to say, "Oh, I'm the only one," or "I feel so alone." And what the rest of us who aren't closeted, need to be doing are building communities and places for people to land when they either come out of religion or come out of hiding.
Yeah, I think that's very sound advice. And I have to say that is kind of one of my goals as far as, showing up to these conferences and getting people to talk and doing these interviews, actually, like I'm doing with you here, is because I want people to hear other stories and know that, what they're experiencing isn't just them, that they can relate to other people in the community. And so that's one of the goals that I have as far as doing these conventions and these interviews and everything like that. So
it's great. I hope to see you at more conventions in the near future.
Yeah, me too. But anyways, I really appreciate you joining me tonight, Matt. And would you like to tell people where they can find you right now?
Sure. So the big one is Patreon, which, if you're familiar with Kickstarter, Kickstarter is kind of like, give me a whole bunch of money and I'll do something. And Patreon is a little different in the sense that Patreon is, I'm going to do this, and if you like it, you can contribute to me doing more of it. I'm not begging people to donate. You can if you want to, but the content is all available for free to everybody. So if you go to patreon.com, that's patreon.com /atheist debates. That will get you to my page there, and the content is available there. It's also a direct link from my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/sansdeity, I believe it is. And from there, you'll be able to, you can always email tv@atheist-community.org or sansdeity@gmail.com. And those will get to me, and I appreciate your time. But there's videos out there to watch and talks to give.
Yeah. And like I said, just one more time, I really appreciate you joining me tonight, giving me this interview, talking with me. And I really, I can't wait to see you possibly in St. Louis if I can get there and go, as well as some other conventions. So anyways, I hope you have a nice night, Matt. And to everybody else watching, I hope you guys have a really nice night. And I will see you guys next time.
Thanks.